Hi guys, my name is David. Welcome to Learn That Photo. Today we are continuing our Photoshop basics. We're going to have a look at curves adjustments, the spot healing brush, and some selective colour adjustments as well. I've got a JPEG file opened up this time. We've previously worked with TIFF and RAW, so just loading in a JPEG this time, and we've got the photo already loaded up, so let's get stuck in. The first thing I'm going to do is have a look at the spot heal tool. So we've used just the brush tool over here before. The spot heal tool is just up here. And you'll see when you click on that, we get a whole new set of options. So just like the other brush tools, you have your size and your hardness. And then along here we also have different types of spot healing, so content aware, create texture, and proximity match. Now for the most part, there aren't many uses where you want to have the create texture option on. In most cases when you're taking out, say, just an unwanted detail in an image, content aware is the place you want to be. Content aware, basically Photoshop tries to make its best guess based on what's around it and what you're trying to take out. Proximity match will only take things that are directly next to what you're taking out. So sometimes it will get that wrong. So I tend to always use content aware until it absolutely doesn't work, and if it doesn't work, then sometimes the clone tool is actually easier than using the other modes on this. So content aware is what we're going to keep selected, and I'm just going to go in, and we have on our little superhero here, hair just running over the face here, and we've got a couple of little hairs or threads just sitting on the mask, and we're just going to use our spot heal to take that out. It's a detail that we just don't want in there. So I have my tool selected. Now I'm going to do this on a new layer so that we're not editing the base layer. In case we make any mistakes, we want the original to go back to. So right click on layer and duplicate. There we go. So we now have our new layer to edit on. So let's just take our tool, click over the areas that we want to take those little details out. See how it just takes out those little threads? And it makes a guess of what you want in its place, and it's just putting that mask background back in. It's making a pretty good guess there. There we go. We could just draw over all of these, and it will go in, and for the most part it gets it quite right. Anything like this that's just one specific solid kind of background, continuous background that's quite similar, it will guess quite well. If you're really in amongst a lot of details with a lot of parts that are changing, it might get it wrong more often, but in places like this, it doesn't do too bad. Now let's do that here. And in this place, it should take the skin tones. It's kind of like a clone tool without having to tell it where to clone from. There we go. It's even adjusting the brightness values as it goes down. It's really making a good guess there. And we could do that if we want to take, say, these individual flyaway hairs off. Do the same thing, and it puts in underneath bits that will match up with what's beside it. There we go. So we can really tidy up that image quite quickly if we wanted to. Any bits like that. And same down here. There we go. Just taking all of those little individual strands out. It's just one less distraction in the image. There we go, just left clicking and dragging along any of those. And this can work for a whole bunch of different uses. So it doesn't have to be a hair, it could be a little bit of fluff, or it could be a speck of dust, or it could be anything at all like that. It could be a spot, it could be a blemish, it could be a crack in the paintwork on a house photo, it could be a patch of mud on a photo of the garden, anything like that at all. As long as it has a pretty consistent background, it will pick reasonably well. And at times it even gets patterns right as well, but that's where you start to run into issues. There we go. That's just tidied that up a lot. Now it looks like really small changes, but if we come out and just click this off and on, you see that it actually does make a little bit of a difference there. If we were getting a nice big print of this made up, those little details could just be a little bit distracting. It just looks like a cleaner, nicer image by doing that. It doesn't take long at all. There you go, so you can see the change that's making. So that's how the Spot Heal tool works, nice and simple. Let's have a look now at curves adjustments. This is a slightly more advanced adjustment layer to the ones that we've used before. So we go Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Curves. Now we have a few settings. There are presets we can play around with as well. At the moment, just leave that as it is. And on here we can select individual colours, which is really good for colour grading, getting a more cinematic look to an image, things like that. But just now, I'm just going to leave it on all. It's got the red, green and blue, it's got all colours in there. So this will be affecting all colours at once, which means it will basically be an exposure adjustment. So the way this differs from other brightness and exposure sliders is this can be done with multiple points on the curve. You could darken the shadows and lighten the highlights in one curve, and because it's got this smooth curve running through it, it does it a bit more gradually. It's not quite as harsh. Whereas if you only bump the highlights up, it might not look very realistic if you've just got these bright highlights and everything else has stayed the same. So it does it a little bit more smoothly, and can really get some interesting results. So we just click somewhere around the middle here, and you can just drag this down the way. You'll see that's darkening everything, or up the way. And it works kind of like a histogram. So down here we've got the shadow end. Along here you've got the highlight end. So let's go ahead and just drag this up this end, and it will affect more of the highlights. And down here it will affect more of the shadows. If we wanted, we could maybe darken the shadows and put another point in where we brighten the highlights. So really contrast it right off the bat. We could make that a bit more subtle. Now I'm going to just bring the blacks up a tiny bit, and this changes the actual black point. You can see that they're in the outfit and the buildings there. Bring it up to a sort of grey. If we brought this right up, we can make the blackest point on this image a dull grey. If we wanted, there's certain times where that look works in a photograph. I don't want to quite go that far, but just bring the black point up a tiny bit. And the whites aren't a pure white, so I could actually get away with bringing this just along here a little. I don't want to go too far and go crazy, but just bring this along a tiny bit. A little increase to the highlights, there we go. And then just like before, we'll invert that layer mask, Control I, turns that layer mask over here black. And we can just paint that on as and where we want. And what we should have is a little bit more contrast and a real boost to the highlights there. So let's just paint it on in here. And the eyes. And then brighten up a little bit of that backdrop. There we go. That's better. So that's how the curves layers work. Now we can do this on individual colours as well. So let's just go back in, New Adjustment Layer, Curves, and let's pick the blues for example. And if we wanted to, we could say lift the amount of blues in the shadows. We'll give a blue tone to the shadow, and drop the amount of blue in the highlights. And by reducing the blue, you're adding yellow. That will give you something that happens on a lot of movies when they colour grade movies and TV shows. You find a little bit extra blue in a lot of the shadows and a little bit of less blue. It looks like more yellow, but it's less blue in the highlights. You can see the difference there. Now that takes away from realistic colour, but it does look maybe a little bit more like a an edited image or an image with a filter over it. And in some cases, if you have, say, a really cinematic theme going on in the images, this might add to it. In other cases, if you're going more documentary or natural light and you want a realistic colour, this will take away from it. So all of these tools, you need to learn when and where to use them, but it's a really handy tool. You can do that with individual colours rather than an exposure right across the board. You can go in and set, let's raise the blues here, or let's take the reds down there. So it can be really powerful. And then that with a layer mask means you could do this to select areas of the image as well, so you could go quite in depth with this. So now let's go in and do some selective colour adjustments. We've got our really cool superhero photo going on from a little superhero photo shoot, and I think let's go in and change this background. Let's give her maybe a pink or a purple or a green background or something, in case you wanted to change one part of the image but not the rest. Now there's a few ways that we could do this. Because we're going to be changing the colours around, I don't want to be taking, say, colours from the top. We've just added blue into the shadows, which means I've added blue into this outfit. I'm going to take off the curves adjustment so that we're not messing with the colours that way as well. Just keep it as they were, nice and realistic looking. And I'm just going to flatten all these layers because we're done with everything previously. There we go. And now we can just go layer, new adjustment layer, and there's a few options when it comes to colours, and these all do different things. So we could go vibrance, we've had a look at before, just makes the colours a bit stronger. The hue and saturation has a few options in there, so let's have a look at that. We can increase the saturation, make it a bit stronger, but we can also increase the lightness and the overall hue for all colours or one by one. So let's take, for example, we have a lot of yellow and blue in this, so let's have a look at the yellows. If we wanted to just affect the yellows, we could, like that, and we could bring the saturation right down. And now we don't have yellow, we just have grey. Now there's a little bits left in there, probably sitting in the reds. But for the most part, those yellows are totally gone. We could also bring those back up, make the colours stronger, make the yellows really stand out. So if you have one colour that's maybe too strong or not strong enough, you can go in and individually balance every single colour exactly how it needs to be, just from this one layer adjustment. You could set the brightness of that yellow, so you can dull it down, or you could make it really bright. If it's a superhero cape, I'm thinking slightly bright, but more the saturation that needs the boost. There you go. And maybe we don't want yellow, maybe we want blue or purple or green. You can just take this hue slider up here and it changes anything that is yellow to something else. So let's drag this along. We have a green cape or a blue cape, and you see it's changing a little bit of the hair and face. Now for the most part what's happening there is the light coming from the right hand side of the image here has bounced onto the cape and it's getting bounced back up into the hair. So you will find that a layer mask would probably be needed for this, so that you could selectively take that off of there or just selectively paint it onto the yellow, but it stops you having to really go in and finely kind of paint it around every little edge. You can just be very quick with the layer mask at this point, and you're not affecting everything else that the brush hits. If we go this way, we could see a nice purple cape, so let's go with that. Let's go with a purple cape. Maybe a bit too strong in the purple. There we go. And again, we've got that hair in there, so let's turn this layer mask off. I'll show you what I mean. We just take our brush tool, make sure it's on white, make sure we have a soft brush and the opacity right up for this, and then Alt right click, drag right or left to change the size, and we can paint that change wherever we want it. So just painting over here. I don't have to really worry about the edges too much if it catches the black, that's okay. Same one here. Just a little bit of yellow here. And then the cape in the background. I'm being quite quick with this, not taking a great deal of time on it, but even then it will work quite well. go, nice pink. Okay. Now, who's doing this as an image that would then be used for anything outside of this tutorial? I would probably zoom in and on each of these parts, especially down here. I'd maybe make sure that I haven't painted on to any of the top things like that. Just a quick second check over things. Like here is just bleeding over into the yellow on the background, so just going with a black brush and then paint it back off. With the layer mask, that's nice and easy to do. There's a little bit missing there. Paint that on. And here, there we go. And that's why I like to have the layers panel, the navigator, both up at the right hand side pretty much all the time, because that's what I'm going back and forward to. If I'm zooming in, I'm using this to click and drag around to different parts of the image. And the layers are where all the information is kind of kept. So that's why I like to have those there all the time. There we go. So that's just now got a nice purpley pink cape. Let's keep that there. Let's do a different type of adjustment on the background. So let's go layer, new adjustment layer. We had a look at the hue saturation. We also have the color balance. That changes the entire image. It's not selective to the color. This is more how you change just the shadows, just the midtones, and just the highlights. So if I wanted just the highlights to have more yellow in them, you'll see it's only affecting the bright parts of the image. If I wanted the shadows to have more pink in them, it's affecting the darker parts of the image. But I don't want that, so I'm just going to right click on that layer and delete layer. I still want this to be selective to the color, so let's go layer, new adjustment layer, and the final one is selective color. And on this one, we can pick out each individual color, and we can change the level of cyan, magenta, and yellow, and also the black level of each color. So I want to change the background now, so let's go to the cyan. If I was to drop that down, you can see how that affects. There we go. So let's go green. Blue, like that, or bring in those purples. You'll notice nothing else has changed. The skin tone isn't changing, the hair isn't changing, the oranges, the reds, they aren't changing. This is only changing parts where cyan is there. Now I think there's some overlap going to be there all the time in the blue, so I also go into the blues, do the same thing. There we go. The bits I would be watching is the edges of the hair. There's a bit of distance between the backdrop and person in this, so there isn't going to be a lot of light hitting the backdrop and bouncing back in. It's not as shiny as the cape, so we don't have those same issues that we had in the hair earlier on, but it's good just to check. There we go. So we've now totally changed how this all looks. To begin with, this was our starting point. We then changed the cape and nothing else, and then we changed the background and nothing else. Just like that. So hopefully this has shown you how to use the clone tool, how to have a look at basic curves adjustments, and also really fun ways of changing individual colours within your image nice and easily, just using our adjustment layers and layer masks again, and using the same techniques with the brush tool, white for on, black for off. If you have any questions, or you learned something from this video or found it useful in any way, please hit like or share or subscribe or drop a comment down below. Thank you so much for listening along.